Good afternoon. We're going to wait a couple of minutes to allow people to sign in. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We're here with our fifth, I think, session on this binational series with special interest in several topics. And today we're going to talk about human rights. I want to start this afternoon by thanking the Department of State, the U.S. Embassy in Mexico, and the Study Abroad Office within ECA for their support, together with Comexus, to embark in this series. That is a series provided or organized to provide undergraduate students with deeper knowledge and understanding about the US and Mexico bilateral relationship. And of course, hopefully entice all of these students to come to Mexico and consider it as a study abroad destination. Today, we have the honor to have with us Irene Tello. Irene is, we are very proud that she is a Fulbright-García Robles alum. And she did her master's degree in international relations in the New York University with this grant. She also has studies in philosophy in the National University of Mexico. She was coordinator of the project Presta tu Voz, give your voice, of that of the Faculty of Philosophy at UNAM. She was research assistant of Federico Reyes Heroles and part of the team of Transparencia Mexicana, Mexican Transparency, as well as research assistant in the GovLab of NYU. Right now, she is the executive director of Impunidad Cero, Zero Impunity, and she is also a op-ed contributor in the newspapers El Universal and in the Este País journal. Thank you very much, Irene, for joining us this afternoon, and we are ready to hear you share with us your insights on human rights in Mexico.
Thank you so much, Hazel. This is going to be a very interesting and hard topic. I'm going to show you some data regarding the human rights crisis in Mexico, but I would like you to keep in mind that the situation, it's not the same in every state. We definitely have a human rights crisis in Mexico, but it's not the same situation from someone that it's in Mexico City that someone that it's in Tamaulipas. So I want you to keep this in mind, because I know that this series is also intended for try and convince you to come and study to Mexico. And I definitely think that Mexico, it's an amazing place to live. And actually in Mexico City, it's extremely more safe than in other states. But I'm going to show you data that is also heartbreaking for the people that, like myself, dedicate to topics of justice and security issues. I'm going to try to keep it short, because I'm going to show you data regarding different human rights crises and topics. And whatever question you have, we can talk at the end. I'm going to try to not speak so quickly. If I start speaking quickly, please tell me, because it's something I usually do. So I'm going to share with you my presentation. And I don't know if you can see it already. Perfect. So I'm going to talk to you about these different issues. These are some of the issues that we have researched and investigated in Impunidad Zero, the organization I have the honor of directing. We founded Impunidad Zero in 2016 because we thought there was a big area of opportunity to have an organization that researched and looked into the lack or the level of rule of law in Mexico. And we started talking about impunity because many of the members that founded Impunidad Zero, we used to work at Transparencia Mexicana, which is the Mexican chapter of Transparency International. And we were so used to looking into corruption issues in Mexico. And we thought that the next step to tackle this crisis of corruption in Mexico was to see what happened when a crime happens in Mexico. Is it being investigated or not? And why is it not being investigated? So these are some of the issues that we look into in my organization. And this is some of the data that I know most about. There are other crises or human rights crises going on right now, but this is the data I feel more comfortable because it's the data that we know and we have studied why we have these levels of violence and of impunity with them. So I'm going to start with gender violence. Maybe many of you have heard that not only in Mexico, I think that in many countries around the world, we're having a crisis regarding the levels of gender violence. After COVID-19, we saw what happened with this violence all over the world. As you can see here is a graph of how domestic violence has been on the rise in Mexico in the whole country since 2015. We definitely think that we have a huge problem regarding domestic violence in Mexico. I'm going to tell you a little bit what we think are the causes, but one of the main causes that we also see is that nothing is happening when this violence is being reported. All of the data I'm going to show, it's mostly crimes that have already been reported, but we have to take into consideration that with crimes in Mexico, there's a big chance that many crimes are not being reported, which is called the hidden figures of crime, or we call it cifra negra. And that's why when we are talking about the crimes that are being already reported, we have to imagine that there are a lot more crimes that are happening and that the victims of this kind of violence are not reporting to the authorities. This is data that actually is, for me, is very hard to speak to because it's regarding sexual violence. Just the sexual violence that it's being reported in Mexico, it has risen 121% since 2015 to 2021. You can see in the graph the different kinds of crimes that are being reported the most. Sexual abuse and rape are one of the most reported crimes that are happening in Mexico, which is something that is very frightening for the people that we look into gender violence issues. The age of the victims are very regarding like 9 to 19 years old. So we have a violence that it's affecting mostly young women, well, children, kids, and young women. So this is something very frightening. What I was telling you before, it's not the same in every state. There are some states that are seeing this issue in the rise for more years than others. So I think that's something that we have to take into consideration. Because of the time I had for the talk, I couldn't show you like the data disaggregated by state level, but that's some of the things we look into Impunidad Zero to try to understand the different patterns of violence that are happening in our country. This is something that I want to talk to you about. This is victims of intentional homicide, are women. I'm separating it with because we have two data. It's femicides and women that have been victims of intentional homicide. Not every homicide that is committed in Mexico against the women, it's investigated as a femicide, which is something that we think it's a wrong thing to do, because when you investigate a femicide since the beginning as a femicide, you have the gender perspective that it's needed to investigate this kind of crimes. And when you only registered it like an intentional homicide of women, what happens is that many times this lack of gender perspective is all along the process, which is something that it's really bad for the investigation itself. So when you put these two figures together, the women are victims of intentional homicide and the victims of femicides, you have the number that approximately 10 women are killed every day in Mexico because of this violence. Now I'm going to talk to you about the issue of disappeared persons in Mexico. When we study impunity, we try to study crimes that don't have any hidden figure of crime. The first crime that comes to mind, it's homicide, because you will think that you wouldn't have any hidden figures of crime regarding homicide, because for each homicide you have a body and the authorities should have to start the investigation, even if no one denounces this homicide. The problem in Mexico is that with the crisis we have of disappeared persons all over the country, we cannot take for granted that we don't have a hidden figure of crime regarding homicides in our country. So we have to take into consideration the number of people that are reported as disappeared by each year, and take it into consideration when we analyze the figures of homicides each year take place in Mexico. Here you can see a graph showing disappeared persons by year and sex. As you can see, this is a problem that has been on the rise as well since 2015. And more and more women are becoming a bigger percentage of the people that are disappeared in our country, which is something that it's really worrying. And it's not, I mean, every person that is disappearing is a tragedy, but we're seeing a pattern and a change of patterns of, first we saw, or many experts told us it was about regarding crimes or organized crimes, and they had a fight, and that's why we had the levels of homicide and these levels of disappeared person. What we are seeing more and more is that more civilians and more people that are not involved in this kind of crime are the victims of this type of crimes, disappearance and homicide. This is a map to show you the difference, which I was telling you about since the beginning. This is the number of disappeared women that have been registered since we have record, that it's approximately since 1970 to 2021. It's extremely different, the number of people that are missing regarding each state. The state that is the most colored, which is the state of Mexico, we have to take into consideration that it's a state that has the most population in the whole country, but also we have to take into consideration that it's the state that has the most violence against women, or the most rates of violence against women. So this kind of difference, I think it's very important to make, because if I just show you these national figures, it seems like we don't have anywhere to start, that any strategy to try to prevent or investigate or sanction these crimes would be useless. But when you start seeing that each of these crimes has a different pattern, and it's different when it's something that it's a gender violence crime, when it's something that affects mostly men, like homicides, then you can start making a strategy to identify where do you start and what capabilities you have regarding the state institutions, mainly the criminal justice institutions. I'm going to talk to you now about homicides. This is one of the crimes we investigated and researched more at Impunidad Cero. Not only why we have a tendency of homicides that we have, but what is like the answer of the state institutions regarding homicides? What is the impunity levels of homicides and femicides that we have currently? So as you can see, this is the graph that shows you the levels of homicides in Mexico. Since last year, there has been a small decrease of the number of homicides yearly in the country. This is something that the current administration has boasted a lot. We are not exactly sure if it has been a result of a new strategy regarding homicides, because we haven't seen this strategy as clearly on the federal level, or if it had more to do with the COVID pandemic. But whatever it had to do, the number of homicides that have been committed in Mexico since 2019 has been decreasing. And we hope that it starts decreasing more, because the level that we had obtained until now, it's a very high level of homicides. We used to be in 2015, I think it was like the 15th country or with more violence. And now I think we're the 5th country in the whole world. So we have to keep on or diminishing this number because it's extremely high right now. I think it's a good news that it has been decreasing, but it's still extremely high for the levels of crime that we were used to in 2015. And this is something that we do in Impunidad Cero. This is our number. Even though I think the authorities should be the one researching the levels of impunity in the country, it's up to civil society organizations or journalists to get this number. I think the reason that the authority doesn't look into the impunity in homicides is because when you look at impunity, you are seeing the ineffectiveness of the criminal justice system. But I think it's super important to see this because when you have impunity for a crime that has such a social impact like homicides, for other crimes, just to put you in an example, in Germany, the impunity in homicides, it's around 40%. You have impunity for almost all crimes, but when you have a good criminal justice that work, the crimes that affect most the social structure, like they could be homicides, gender violence, you have a tendency to have lower impunity in them. What we have seen in Mexico is that since 2007, the impunity for this crime has been on the rise. And since in the last 3 years, it has been above 89% of impunity. Just to put you a number, from 100 homicides that are committed in Mexico, only 11 are being sanctioned, which is a very low number regarding this horrible crime that affects so much society in general. And now I'm going to talk to you about impunity as a whole and why we have these levels of impunity. I couldn't translate this diagram, sorry, it was an image, but as you can see, this is a diagram of impunity in Mexico. In the purple square, you're going to see the number of crimes that are being committed each year, which is 100%, and it's more than 27 million crimes that are being committed each year in Mexico. From this, you have to start to take into consideration which of those crimes are being reported. It's not the same for every crime. Like I told you, when you have a homicide, the authority has to start investigating, even though you don't report it. But for many crimes, like it could be a robbery, sexual assault, many of the sexual crimes have to be denounced to start being investigated. Rape not, but most of them, yes. Many of these crimes are not being reported. So this is the biggest problem we have in Mexico. The impunity starts because people don't have trust in the justice system or the institutions into which they have to report a crime. So they are not reporting the crimes they're being victims of. And then we have the second problem, which is what you see in orange. From the crimes that are being reported, that it's almost 10%, not for everyone as a criminal investigation is started. This is due to several problems. Sometimes they don't start an investigation because they don't have enough evidence. But in Mexico, if you report a crime, by law, you should start an investigation. And it's not happening like that in every state. This is a deficiency from part of the prosecutor's offices, which is the institutions that are responsible for investigating crime in Mexico. It's very strange because in most countries, the police investigates a crime. We have here in Mexico that it's not the police investigated, it is a prosecutor's offices. And that's, I think, one part of the problem. We should have police trained, and with not the corruption problem they have actually, the policemen in Mexico right now, because if we had police trained to investigate, the people that work at prosecutors' offices would be trained to file or to assemble the criminal files, the criminal investigation files in a more profound way. Most people that work at a prosecutor's offices are lawyers. So they are not trained to investigate crime like you would have a special a forensic specialist that they are trained to investigate. So we should start training our policemen in Mexico to start knowing how to investigate the crime. But well, Here you see that from the crimes that are being reported to the crimes that are being investigated, we have a lower percentage. And the biggest problem is that the investigations that are started at the prosecutor's offices, only 1.2% approximately of all the whole investigations are being actually solved. So that's the problem with impunity. A lot of crime is happening. Many of those crimes are not being reported. Of the crimes that are being reported, not for everyone an investigation is started. And the investigations that are started in Mexico, a small percentage are being solved and sanctioned by the judiciary system. This is another data we show, because in Mexico, you talk a lot about how impunity levels are like 99%. I think it's important to say that when you say that, it is true, but you are also considering the hidden figure of crime, which is what I was showing you before, all the crimes that are not being reported. This is very important to put a lot of attention to, because one of the recommendations we have given at Impunidad Cero is that we need better reporting mechanisms so that you don't have to go to a prosecutor's office to file a criminal complaint, and you can have a policeman reporting or actually filing the criminal complaint on your behalf. And also, in this age, we should have like digital apps or digital platforms, so you can report a crime through a digital platform and you don't have to go waste hours and hours of your day to report the crime you have been victim of. So I think it is very important to see this figure, because one of the main problems we have right now with the impunity levels in Mexico is the lack of reporting of crimes. And this is something that could be easily fixed with new mechanisms of reporting that reduce the levels of corruption that happen when people report a crime in a prosecutor's offices. This is something I also wanted to talk to you about. It's the health issue. We at Impunidad Cero have been looking into what is happening with the health system. We started investigating the level of corruption in the health system because we thought that corruption in the health system immediately translate into a human right violation. Any money or any public money that you are not spending that was destined originally for the health system, and it's being embezzled away by corruption networks, it's a money that could have been dedicated to have another people being taken care of by that public health system. So that's why we started looking into the health system since 2017, I think we started doing this kind of research. But something that I don't know if you have heard about, and it's extremely important that we know and we make more public and that more people know about, is the crisis of the shortage of medicines that we have actually in Mexico. So since 2019, we have a shortage of medicines in Mexico, medicines and drugs from the public system. This was originated because the government, the actual government, the federal administration, said that they had a corruption, or we had a corruption problem regarding the procurement processes of medicines at the national level. Beforehand, before 2019, there was like this one big national purchase of medicines for the whole public health system that had been created along 7 years. It was a very challenging and a very good, in my behalf and in many experts' opinion, it was a very good mechanism for buying medicines. And they installed that national program because we used to have a lot of corruption problems regarding procurement processes of medicines in the country. But the government said that they still had corruption problems, and they decided to create another program without having the necessary knowledge of how the program operated and what they needed to create a new one. So before the COVID pandemic, they started changing the national procurement processes of medicines, and they had as a result that now this public system that was created to purchase medicines for the whole country, right now it's not working. So in 2021, just to put you a reference, more than 24 million medical prescriptions were not filled in the public system. This is affecting all the people that are beneficiaries of this public health system in Mexico, which is millions of people each day and each year. And also and mostly it's affecting people that are victims or that are sick with cancer. We saw that cancer was one of the main sickness that were being affected by this problem, because the government started another battle, a legal battle, with the main producer of cancer treatment in Mexico, which is PISA, or it was PISA. So this is a human rights crisis that is happening, and I have not seen it being reported internationally, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because we hear about homicides and gender violence and disappeared persons, but we are not looking into what is happening with the health system in Mexico, and I think it's really important that we see it. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the causes of this human rights crisis violations that we have in Mexico. I think we have to take into consideration, as I was telling you before, the impunity levels. The impunity levels are sending a very dangerous image to people that are committing crimes everywhere, that you can kill a person, rape a woman, disappear a child, and nothing is going to happen. So I think we have to talk about that, the consequence that impunity levels have in crime in general in the country. Corruption is something that we also have to talk about. It's not only the corruption that everyday people suffer, it's the corruption when you report a crime and you are reporting to an authority that could have a liaison or a relationship with organized crime. I think that's the worst corruption, and we can see the levels of impunity regarding, I don't know, journalists' violations and human rights defenders that are being actually extremely violented in the country as a whole. This kind of corruption affects them the most, because when people decide to denounce the scaling of violence they're being victims of, it's very probable that if the authority they are reporting to has a relationship with the people that are being responsible of these crimes, that a bigger violence is going to happen. We see this with gender violence, we see this with disappeared persons, we see this with journalists that are being violented and all over the country. Also, one of the things I think we have to talk and talk more about is what is happening with the public security in Mexico. It's currently being under or going through a militarization process, which is never a good thing. We do have a very acute problem of organized crime in many states, but militarization is never the answer. Maybe for some states, which could be the case of Michoacán, which has a very complicated history of violence in the zone. But for the rest of the states, we shouldn't be talking about the military or the army to be the solution to these problems. And I think it's actually contributing more to the human rights crisis that we're seeing all over the country. Definitely, we have to talk about organized crime when we are talking about these levels of violence. Since 2006, that when the national strategy to fight organized crime was created, we have seen how all these crimes have been on the risen. So I think there's definitely a correlation between a failed strategy that was intended to structure the organized crime networks and the level of violence in the country as a whole. And we have also need to start talking in Mexico about prevention. Many issues, like it could be gender violence, the problem with gender violence and crime in general. If we start thinking about strategies about prevention and not think about what I'm going to do when the crime has already happened, I think that would change the whole narrative. Right now, many of the strategies, the security strategies, are based on, well, we have these levels of crime and these levels of impunity. What are we going to do? And they don't start thinking about how are we going to prevent this violence in the first place from actually happening, which is something we have to start talking more and more in Mexico. Regarding the crisis of impunity, this is the thing that I'm specialized and that I know the most. this is like some answers, but there are many. We have low confidence in institutions of justice regarding as a whole, like a population. So we have low confidence, and then we don't report crime. We have low report of crimes in Mexico, like I showed you. We have low effectiveness in criminal investigations. We have corruption issues in the criminal justice system. We have not enough qualified personnel in police and prosecutors' offices. We have a shortage of forensic experts in the country, which is something that it's also affecting the impunity levels as a whole. We have low public spending in the justice system, and we have low investigation capabilities in the prosecutors' offices and in the police offices. So what can we do? I know I'm being extremely simplistic, but it's just for the amount of time that we have. I definitely should start reminding what I was telling you at the beginning. We need to differentiate the different situations of violence that each state has. It's not the same everywhere, thankfully. And because if we don't differentiate the difference of the gender violence and problem that they have in the Mexican Estado de Mexico compared to what they have at Yucatan, then it seems that nothing can be done, that the levels of impunity and violence are everywhere the same, and that our justice criminal system doesn't work. If you start identifying that it's different in each state, what happens is that you see that some states are good regarding violence and regarding impunity, and you start looking for good practices that already exist in Mexican states. And that's something that we do at Impunidad Cero. We start doing, well, which are the most effective prosecutors' offices in the country. It turns out that sometimes for certain crimes, like it could be homicides, it's Yucatan. So we look into what they are doing to have lower levels of impunity in homicides, so we can translate those good practices and teach the other prosecutors' offices those good practices that are already being implemented in Mexico. I think we have to start talking more about digital reporting mechanisms for crime. We at Impunidad Cero created this platform that it's called denuncia.org. And it's a platform that teaches every person that wants to report a crime how they can do it, where is the office more close to them from where it happened, the crime, so you can report in the office that's closest to you. It teaches you step by step what you need to do. So I've been victim of, I'm going to put an example of a robbery. What should I bring? What are they going to ask me? What should they charge me to start a criminal investigation? What happens if they want me to give them money to start a criminal investigation? All of this information that may seem like a logical step that a policeman should explain you, we put that in a digital platform, and it helps. Until today, it has helped more than 300,000 people in the whole country. We also need to start thinking about strategies based more on prevention, not like I told you before. It's not enough, or if you start looking at crime and say, well, what I'm going to do with this crime, you are already arriving late. You need to start to see how I'm going to prevent this crime from happening in the first place. And then if crimes keeps happening, what I'm going to do to investigate and sanction those crimes. You need to invest more in the criminal justice system. I know this is a difficult issue because it's like this vicious circle that people don't want to invest in institutions that they think that are not effective, and they are not effective. But if you don't invest more in them, you're going to have the same problems over and over again. We need to have a national strategy against corruption. The current federal administration talks about its strategy against corruption, but when we look at what they are actually doing to prevent, investigate, and sanction corruption in the country, it's not a very good or a real strategy that it's taken place. And we need a national strategy against gender violence. It's becoming more and more of a problem in Mexico. And even though it's a crime that it's being investigated at the state level, federal institutions should be looking into it. What are we going to do to help women that are in these situations of violence to help break the cycle of violence? And I know it's been a lot, but I just wanted to give you like a small brief of what's happening in the country. And now I'm looking forward to talking to you and your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this very informative and very succinct presentation. I know that there were many topics and many different numbers that you wanted to share with us, and I agree. I am grateful that you were able to put them all together in just half an hour. So we have a couple of questions, Irene. The first one is, do you have the impunity percentage in the US? I think they're trying to compare where Mexico is, or maybe if you have something to compare Mexico with other countries.
The one we have is the one regarding impunity in homicides. The one I have more in my mind right now is the one in Germany. And it's like you have impunity in homicides in Germany that it's 40%. And you have impunity in homicides in Mexico that it's almost 90% of impunity.
Okay, so the next question is, and I know you talked a little bit at the end of your presentation about this, but what strategies of crime prevention would you recommend as a good start for the Mexican government?
It depends on the crime we're talking about. That's something we also need to take into consideration. It's not the same regarding gender violence that regarding disappeared or homicides in a state. But just to put you an example regarding gender violence, a lot of campaigns to help women identify different violence in their relationships. What we have in the state level, it's women that are being in relationships that start having violence in the relationship. They don't identify this as violence, and the violence keeps getting scaling and scaling. So for gender violence, I think we have to put a lot about campaigns of what is violence and what you can do about it. Regarding homicides, we have to look into what's happening with youth and the level of disemployment in the state level. But it depends on the different crimes, the type of prevention strategy that you can create.
Okay, thank you. I have a question myself. What level of government and what branch of government do you think it's easier or more important to start with when you're thinking about change and you're thinking about moving forward in making all of the situation better?
Right now, it has to be at the state level. We are having a lot of issues trying to work with agencies at the federal level. They don't look NGOs with very good eyes. So we had to actually reorganize our strategy in many NGOs that I know to start working with state and local actors. And this is something good because we that have been looking into impunity and how prosecutors' offices work in the whole country, it's easier to work with prosecutors' offices at the state level that we work with the general attorney's office at the federal level. But right now, I think it's better to start at the local and state level than at a national level.
Okay. Thank you. Then there's another question. It says, what's the US influence in Mexico to reduce impunity?
There have been a lot of money and efforts in the bilateral relationship between the US and Mexico to start reducing impunity levels. The whole Iniciativa Mérida and the department, the INL, the International Narcotics Law and Office in, well, I'm saying the name wrong, but there has been a lot of efforts to try to reduce the impunity level by strengthening the capabilities that are installed at the prosecutor's offices at the state level. So a lot of training, they are giving a lot of grants to try to reduce corruption in these offices. A lot has been done, but it's a problem that we have not looked into for years. So even though there has been a lot of effort from behalf of the United States to try and make or have better justice systems, we still have a lot to do at the state level with the prosecutor's offices.
Thank you. There's another question from Lupita Montoya. She's asking, have there been any successful campaigns that you can emulate for getting more people to report crime? Would it be an option to have a private or non-governmental site for reporting crime?
Yes, I think one of the good practices regarding reporting crime, you can see it with what is happening currently with the extortion campaign that is happening all over Mexico. So they created a special number that you can report extortion into that number, and you can do it so anonymously. So you don't have to say your name, you don't have to say many details, you just have to say that you have been victim of that crime, what happened, and they start investigating it. So I think that just having this campaign, a number that is dedicated to it, and that people know that they can report without having to give their names, I think that's have been some good practices, and that people have been, I think more people are denouncing extortion now than before. And many extortion, or the main type of extortion that happens in Mexico, it's done by phone. So they are actually looking into the numbers that are using, or the people are using to commit these crimes, and they are identifying where are these numbers located to try to disentangle or to broke this network that is making this crime happen.
I have one more question. It says, how optimistic do you feel about the near future of the human rights situation in Mexico? And maybe I would take advantage of having the mic, and I would add to that. Do you know how many NGOs or institutions are around there that are supporting this change into a better human rights situation in the country?
I try to stay optimistic, because I think if we don't stay optimistic and we don't think that something might changing, and I think it's changing in different states, like I tried to explain you before, then what happens is that we don't do nothing, and we just sit there and say like, well, this is the situation and nothing can be done about it. And when we start looking at the differences, what's happening with gender violence in different states, what happened with homicides in different states, we have a state in Mexico that reached zero impunity for homicides, that is Yucatan. So we have good practices going on. And when we have and look into those good practices, I think you start thinking that another thing can be done. Regarding the number of NGOs, you can see how since, I don't know, this is a number I don't have as accurately and as fresh as possible, but since 2000 to now, the number of organizations that are being created, it's increasing and increasing. So I think more people are looking into this issue and into tackling one of the many issues of the human rights crisis we have. More organizations that are being dedicated to help women identify violence and do something about it. So I think there's a lot happening, and I like this phrase that I don't remember right now who said it, but I think it's very hopeful that when you think that everything is wrong, just look to the people that are doing something about it or helping, and you're going to see a lot of people. And I think when you look at those organizations and those people, it gives you just like a reason to have hope that things will change in a near future in Mexico.
Thank you. One more question. How is violence affecting migrants passing through Mexico?
I didn't want to talk about it because we have not looked into the situation in Impunidad Cero. From what I know, it's a very another crisis. I think it's worse on them because they are afraid of going to the police or to the prosecutor's office to report. They don't know. So it's like a double violence and a double impunity. So we definitely have a crisis that affects it in a more, I don't know, intense way migrants are passing through our country.
Okay. Now, do you believe that educating the public will improve the human rights issue in Mexico? And have there been any efforts in educating the public, more specifically the issues with domestic violence? This is Elizabeth Rivera.
Yes, I definitely think that education is one of the solutions that we have to look into, mainly regarding gender violence. What has happened, I think, depends on the state. What you see, at least in Mexico City, it's extremely different from what is happening in other states. Like, just that we have the right to abortion since a lot of years in the capital. We have a lot of resources so women know how to report and identify these patterns of violence. And I think it had to do with the levels or the education campaigns that are going on since primary education to higher level education. But definitely, I think that if we don't take into the equation education to prevent and help people identify when a violence is happening and that it could escalate, then we're not going to be able to do many with the criminal justice to eradicate this violence.
Okay, I have another question from Lupita Montoya. Have you looked into any potential correlation between the participation of women in local government or police departments and impunity levels?
No, we have not looked into. From what I'm seeing, it has more to do that they have specialized investigation units regarding gender violence. At least that's what we have seen regarding impunity in femicides. So the states that have this specialized units completely dedicated to investigate femicides have lower levels of impunity than the ones that they don't have this specialized unit.
Then an anonymous attendee is asking, is social media helping in any way with the human rights violations reporting?
Yes, I think it is. Many journalists are going to social media to report they're being harassed by crime or by the government itself. Women are going to social media to report as well. And we are starting to see some efforts. Like, I know mostly about the issue of gender violence. A lot of young lawyers, women lawyers, are going to social media to explain to other women their rights. What are the process to report this type of crimes? What can they report and into which authority? Like, if you have to go to the police, if you have to go to a prosecutor's office. So I'm seeing more and more, at least from what I've known more, that it's gender violence, that people are using social media to try to do something regarding this human rights crisis.
Thank you. I remind everyone that we have still the question option open. Irene, I also have another question, if you don't mind, and it has to do, or if you can talk about things or issues where you think that even though the situation is not the best, there have been some things that have been better. And maybe what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking about gender violence, we have seen the numbers grown, but maybe what I'm thinking is also that now women are more vocal, that now some issues have been solved and there is more police reports or more reporting on this. And I'm not trying to justify, I'm just trying to think that now things that were not reported before are being reported now. But I don't know if you have anything on mind or in mind in that sense, in this case or in other examples.
Definitely. And that's something that it's like a huge enigma for us, because when you investigate impunity, you have to have three kinds of data. Victimization data. So it's like you ask people if they have been victims of a crime and if they decided to report or not. Then you have the next figure, or the data, that it's the number of crimes that are actually being reported, which is something I tried to show you in the data I have. Regarding violence of women in Mexico, we are still missing the first data, the victimization data. We have a survey, a national survey that it's been taking every 5 years. and it should have been published last year. It's called the ENDIRE, or Encuesta Nacional de la Dinámica de los Hogares. I'm going to try to translate it in a while, but this is the main victimization data we used to have to identify how many crimes are being happening and what is happening to those crimes. Since we don't have the victimization data, now we don't know if it's on the rise because more people are denouncing, more women are denouncing, or if it's on the rise even though a lot of crime is still happening. I do believe as well that it has to do that more women are identifying these different kinds of violence they can be victim, and they are deciding to do something about it. But we need the victimization data to be sure what is actually happening in the country.
Okay, we have one more question from Jessica Contreras, and she is asking, what are the points of hope you have identified among these tough numbers and reality in Mexico?
What are the what, sorry?
Points of hope.
Like I was saying, I'm seeing young women in Mexico, how organized they are, how vocal they are, how creative they are. Like I'm seeing it this all the time. Like we get emails almost every day of people that try to come to us because they want to do something. So it's like, I know how to program and I'm a designer and I want to do something. So just hearing that from younger and younger people that are actually want to do something regarding the crisis we have and what some people are doing. Like we know a lot of lawyers that right now are going or using social media to explain other people their rights, what they can do in a situation of a crime. Lawyers all over the country that are organized to help women, give them a first legal advice regarding the violence they're going through and what they can do. So I think that for me is the reason for hope. Like if we look at what is actually being done by the people to want to make a change in the country, for me, that's the best reason for hope than just seeing all that it's going wrong. And it's a lot, but there's also a lot of going on to try to make the situation better.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Irene. I don't know if you want to close giving any last message with this presentation, but if you don't, that's fine.
No, I would just keep like, even though I dedicate myself to these topics each day, I work with an amazing group of women that it's just, it keeps me going. And I invite you that if you want to consider Mexico, at least Mexico City, it's very safe for a lot of people. And you're going to see this vibrant community of people that are actually using all their talents to try to create a change, not only in Mexico, but in many areas. And if you want to help, even though you're staying in the United States, organizations like us, that you should contact us. Like we always need people that help us with design, programming, with data analysis. So I'm going to leave you my email there, but anything you want to do, it really helps. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Let me remind you that we are going to have a little bit of change in our usual dates, and we're meeting tomorrow instead of Friday. So please join us tomorrow at the same time at 4. We will be talking about security. So hopefully it will be a continuation of today's presentation. Irene, thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Hazel. It has been a true honor speaking to you all.
Everyone is very happy. There are many comments in the chat. So thank you very much, Irene.
Thank you.
Bye.